Dear listeners, imagine that you are standing on a cliff's edge. Your backpack is heavy, there is no way forward, and you cannot bring yourself to turn back. You are frozen, caught between a direction that has run out and a past you don't want to return to. That is not a metaphor, that is the moment, I'd say. Yeah. That is the moment Aryeh Green actually lived. On a mountain in Israel, alone, weeks into an 800-mile hike he had undertaken after his marriage fell apart. And what he found in that frozen moment: three deep breaths, a lightened back, a changed attitude became the seed of everything he has built since. So, today we talk about what happens when you walk your way towards peace. So, hey, dear listeners, welcome back to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, where we explore the real, honest paths toward feeling well and living with purpose. I'm your host, Aryeh, and I'm really, really glad that all of you are here today. And my guest today is an author, speaker, business executive, and life coach based in Israel. And he is a former senior advisor to Netan Baransky in the Israel Prime Minister's office, the Chief Strategy Officer at Gigawatt Global promoting renewable energy across Africa, the founder of Media Central in Jerusalem, and the author of two deeply personal and widely acclaimed books: My Israel Trail, Finding Peace in the Promised Land, and his newest, Finding Peace in the Promised Land, A New Approach. Well, not taking much of a time, dear listeners. Let's get started, and please welcome our guest, Aryeh Green. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David. Very, very happy to be on the show, and thank you for taking the time. Looking forward to our conversation.
Amazing. Amazing, Arya. And Arya, before we get into the five principles and everything that you have uh, distilled from your journey, I want to go back to the beginning. Like, you were over 50 years old, your marriage had just ended in a way you hadn't chosen. And you decided to hike 800 miles alone across Israel. So, what was the actual reasoning in that moment? What did you think you were going toward?
In the moment when I decided to do the hike, you're asking?
Yes.
Well, I would say the real uh, the real answer, if I want to keep it brief, is that for many years I've had friends, children of friends, and friends of children who have hiked the Israel Trail. It's kind of a rite of passage for many Israeli youth to spend a few months with a backpack hiking the length and breadth of the land. It's kind of akin to, for an American audience, in the case, the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail. For a European audience, I guess the Pilgrims Trail in Spain and Portugal. I'm sure that India has similar trekking trails, obviously,
Exactly.
aside from
Yeah.
climbing Mount Everest or the Himalayas or Nepal. But it's kind of something that many Israeli youth do after the army to kind of clear their heads and decide what they want to do with their lives. But of course, many Israelis come to India for the same purpose.
Hey, dear listeners, before we begin, a quick note from Healthy Man Pay Awake. This episode is created for educational and informational purposes only. The views shared by our guests are their own and may not reflect those of the host or network. Nothing in this conversation should be taken as medical, legal, financial, or professional advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making important decisions. We encourage you to listen with curiosity, think independently, and use this content as a starting point for reflection, not a substitute for professional guidance. Now, settle in and enjoy the conversation.
So I had wanted to do it for many years because I grew up in California and I've lived in Israel for 40 years and enjoyed both the desert in the south and the forests in the north and the beaches to the west and always been kind of an outdoorsy type.
Hmm.
And so what happened was as I was going through the 2+ years of real anguish in this divorce that I hadn't looked for, I spent a lot of time on different meditative retreats in the desert and long walks in forests and what have you. And I ended up just as the divorce was being finalized, as my daughter, my youngest daughter, finished her 2 years of military service. We went out to California. We were hiking in Yosemite, and we hiked up to the top of Half Dome, which your listeners may be familiar with, is a granite slab above Yosemite Valley, a grueling hike up the back face of what's basically a vertical wall. And we just decided to do it. And long story short, we got to the top, and it was grueling. I mean, psychologically and emotionally, not just physically. And we almost were swept off literally the sides of the mountain of the rock. And I said to my daughter at that point, you know what? I'm going to hike the Israel Trail. This has really given me the motivation to do that. And so 3 months later, and literally just a few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was out and hiking. As somebody said to me 3, 4 weeks into the hike, a forest ranger who offered me a ride for the last kilometer of my journey, said when I explained to him what I was doing, he said, "Oh yeah, sure." He summed up basically 8 weeks of grueling 20, 30 kilometers a day with nonstop, no breaks, all alone with a 25 kilo pack on my back. He summed up in 3 words. "Oh, right. Clearing your head," he said. I said, "Yep, that's what that was all about."
And I want to ask you about healing, right? So you wrote that on the trail you meditated on mountaintops and cried in bright creek beds, uh,
Mm.
wrote like anguished journal entries and composed songs to lift your spirits. So
Yeah.
what did the physical act of walking day after day, mile after mile, do for the psychological process that sitting still couldn't have done?
Well, I appreciate the question because it's something I do deal a lot with in my first book, My Israel Trail. The minutes and hours and days that went by walking through the desert and then later walking through the forests, as I said, all on my own, was obviously an incredibly deep time of contemplation, and that's what led me to some of the basic elements, or I'll call them, um, well, if they weren't epiphanies, they were rediscovery of certain truths that we all may be aware of already. The importance of humility, trudging through the desert day after day and recognizing our place in the universe is relatively insignificant. The importance of acceptance, that here I am on the side of a mountain and I've got to figure out where to go. I can't, I was not only once, but in a particular situation I describe in the book, couldn't figure out whether I should go back or forward. And I wanted to call the search and rescue services and said, no, just accept it. This is your reality. You've got to deal with that reality. And that was true for being divorced as well. And that's true for the other elements that came to me in the hours and days of walking. And of course, that's what led me to write this new book, because those thoughts were in my mind even in the first book. I mentioned it very, very obliquely at one point, hiking on the border between Israel and Lebanon, that some of the issues that I was dealing with that were helping me heal from my divorce, and in the end were extremely helpful to others for meeting their own personal challenges. And at that particular point, thinking about how close I was to Lebanon and different wars that we fought, I said to myself, a lot of these elements are applicable also to the Arab-Israel conflict, to the conflict between Muslims and Jews and Christians in this region, and particularly the idea of forgiveness, which is another of the five elements. Um, and so that's kind of that idea was percolating already 10 years ago. 8 years ago, when I wrote the book, my publisher insisted I take out almost all the references to the Middle Eastern conflict because it was just too much to put into one book. It was already two books. It was a book about the hike itself and the journey and the history and the geography of the land of Israel, and then the second element, which is the personal growth side, the healing from my divorce, um, and meeting personal challenges. So that, in the end, 8 years later, has become my second book, which is the application of the five elements to not just our personal challenges that we face, but intercommunal and international challenges, particularly the Arab-Israel conflict.
Definitely. Like the moment of the cliff edge, like frozen, unable to go forward or back, you put
Mm.
down the backpack, took 3 breaths, and something shifted. As you wrote, like the pack had not changed, you had changed. So, what was the actual internal shift? Like, what did you understand in that moment that you hadn't understood before?
Well, thank you for so carefully reading my writing, because it's kind of fun to have the incident, my words kind of read back to me, and also remembering the incident. I have to give credit to Thomas Crum and his book, Three Deep Breaths, because that's what got me through that particular situation. And yeah, that was one of the one of the situations I was just referring to, on the side of a cliff, where I didn't know whether to go forward or back, and I started to panic. And I took those three deep breaths, and having put down my bags, picking them up, I realized that they hadn't changed. They seemed lighter, but they hadn't changed. Something in me had changed, and what in me had changed was I had discovered the path, which I don't mean as a metaphor. I mean I suddenly realized where I had missed the trail sign, which showed me, with some handholds actually drilled into the wall, where to where to climb up this cliff, and I had missed them. And so what I recognized was that that was a metaphor for whether it was me and my divorce, or whether it was others facing personal challenges. And it's certainly true for what we're looking at with the any international conflict. It doesn't matter whether it's India and Pakistan, or historically France and Germany, or whether it's what's going on today between Muslims and Jews, or Arabs and Israelis here in our region. Sometimes you have to put down your pack. You have to put down that baggage. You have to release our connection, and our I guess, angst, I would say, um, over historical injustices, whether they're real or perceived. We have to put down the baggage of the propaganda that's been spouted, in terms of especially on, forgive me, the Arab and Muslim side, the culture of hatred, and the anti-Israel rhetoric, which has just been growing over the last decades, but it's been actually around for 100 years. And sometimes we all, Arabs and Jews and others, of course, as well, have to put down that baggage of of everything that we bring to this relationship, just as we would as individuals, and look for the path, decide on a path, recognize with some gratitude, which is another element that I had mentioned of the five elements, recognize that we have a mutual interest, having forgiven ourselves, to work towards peace, and let the baggage kind of settle. And when we then pick it up again, because I'm not saying we don't ignore either perceived or actual pain and suffering, but having put that baggage down, once we go to pick it up again, when we know the path, when we know our objective and our goal is real peace and coexistence based on our own traditional sources, so the baggage is simply less heavy. It's lighter, it's easier to deal with, it's easier to shoulder that pain and suffering. It's easier to reach forgiveness based on a certain acceptance, going back to the five elements. So that kind of ties the pieces together when you ask about the intention of that particular situation and what it taught me. Um, it taught me how important it is, whether it's in a relationship and getting over a divorce, whether it's trying to deal with grief or being fired from a job, or certainly in our relations as communities, as societies, or in our international relations, that sometimes you just got to put the baggage down and put it aside, in order to enable you to figure out what your next steps are.
Mm, very true. Very, very true. Yeah. And also here, I'd love to ask, like, for someone who cannot hike 800 miles, but who is carrying their own version of what you were carrying when you set out, a loss, a betrayal, a frozen place where forward and backward both feel impossible. Um, what would you say to them about the principle behind what the work gave you?
I think really, it's difficult to sum it up. The five elements, I'll give them to you in order, so that you and our listeners can kind of follow along.
Yeah.
Humility was the first, acceptance the second, both achieved or learned in the desert. Um,
Mm,
Gratitude was the third, and forgiveness the fourth, and forgiveness specifically on the border with Lebanon. and towards kind of the middle, towards the end of my journey, was an important element that I recognized was central to our conflict, the Arab-Israel conflict. Um, and the fifth is the sense of purpose, and that really, I would say, is the best answer to your question. That all the others combined together, uh,
Mm.
within the context of my hike on that last week of the hike, recognizing that I'm going to get home in a week, in a walk, at the end of this hike back to my home, and I'm still going to be divorced. In other words, I've accepted that reality. I've forgiven my wife and God and myself and anybody else who needed to be forgiven. I'm full of gratitude for the blessings in my life, and I have a great sense of humility in all of it. But I'm going to arrive home. I'm still going to be divorced. Nothing's changed. I've had this terrific 1,000-kilometer hike, and nothing's really changed. And yet, my sense of purpose to give meaning to my life, as Viktor Frankl is very well known for connecting the dots in terms of having a sense of purpose, a real goal in life, which gives your life meaning.
Yeah.
That became for me a very important kind of driving point to get home with and feel like, okay, on the personal level, the professional level, I have a sense of purpose. I have re reestablished or prioritized in a different way my different goals. And also for myself personally, I was ready for love. Again, I knew that. I knew that was something I was ready to explore, in terms of, and thank God I did, I have to say, found the new love of my life. That was 11,
Mm.
12 years ago. Um, 2 years after the hike, I was married. A year and a half after the hike, I was married to my wife, still my wife now, Miriam. And so that sense of purpose, the set of goals and objectives was an integral kind of concluding element, and it's certainly true. And I focus on that a great deal in my new book. The subtitle for the new book is From Hatred to Humanity. And the conceptual framework is that we all, Arabs and Jews, Muslims, Christians, Israelis, and what have to have within ourselves a sense of purpose, a goal and objective, which includes or even sets as the primary goal and objective, the reaching of peace, of real coexistence and harmony between our peoples. And from that, everything else can flow in terms of the practical steps that we take to achieve that. In order to reach that sense of shared goals, we need to go through the process of a bit of humility, accepting the reality we're in, forgiving the other for real or perceived injustice and suffering, as I said, having gratitude for all our blessings. But to have a shared sense of purpose is, I would say, in answer to your question, the most integral, the most important element, of both aspects of our personal growth and meeting personal challenges and meeting this incredible historical
Mm.
centuries old challenge of resolving the Middle East conflict.
Great. That's really great. And also, if you have to share one advice to the listeners today, what that will be in short.
Oh, my advice for listeners is it's a bit trite to say, but just off the cuff, I think, not to plug my book over much, my first book, but this combination of humility and acceptance and gratitude, and forgiveness and a sense of purpose, has changed my life. I mean, it's been transformative. And those 5 elements for me, have become a way of life, constantly reminding myself how grateful and lucky I am for all the blessings in my life. Every morning, we say that in the Jewish tradition, we say a prayer saying, "Thank you, God, for returning my soul to me," and go on with blessings that continue praising God for the blessings in our life. The issue of humility and acceptance to me, I have a meditative practice in the morning of repeating one of the names of God. The first time God defines himself with a name, is in the book of Genesis in the Bible. Sorry, in the book of Exodus in the Bible, when Moses finds the burning bush, and the Jewish and Christian and Islamic traditions, this part of the Hebrew Bible is an integral statement of who God is and our relationship to Him. Because Moses asks God, "What is your name?" And God says, basically an untranslatable Hebrew phrase, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. The first time he describes himself, God says, I am what I am, or I am who I am, or I am that will, I will be what I will be. It's almost untranslatable, but we can understand basically it's saying, I can't explain it to you. You cannot understand me. You cannot understand who I am, what I can be, what I can do, how the world works. And that name of God, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, became for me a meditative phrase or mantra, if you will, which every morning reminds me that I'm not in control of the world. That we have to have a certain sense of humility and acceptance. That it's basically a recognition that God controls the world, and if you don't believe in God as a listener, then that's okay too. Fate, however you want to look at our spiritual universe, that we're not in control of many of the things in our life, and
Exactly.
that gives us perspective.
Amazing. Lovely. So, I mean, it's really, really great. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, dear listeners. And if this conversation gave you something to sit with, a principle you needed to hear, a moment of recognition, quite sense that the walk through your own difficulty might be taking you somewhere worth going, then please honor that. And what I'll do is I'll put Aryeh's books and details into the show notes. And if someone in your life is carrying something heavy right now and needs to hear that peace is possible on the other side of it, please share this episode with them. With this hope, this is your host, Vivek, and this is Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'd say take care of yourselves and see you next time. Thank you so much.